I know you get tired of me saying this, but I feel like I need to say it because I know we have some visitors here tonight. What we are doing this year is we are reading the New Testament at least 5 times through as a congregation this year. And how we're doing that is we're reading 5 chapters for an entire week, the same 5 chapters each day for an entire week. And then, of course, on Thursday we'll start the next 5 chapters and so on and so forth. Some people are doing that 5 times a week. Some others are doing it 7 times a week. Some of you, and I won't mention names, are doing it 2 times a week. But that's still 2 times that you'll read the New Testament through. We encourage us to do 5 times at least, but we know life gets busy. But looking forward to this. And so because of that, we have to hit the highlights of the various books that we go through. And it's a shame on all of them, but especially the book of Hebrews. It would be good to have some more time in this. Actually, this is the book that Mindy introduced to the ladies' class last night. And I should have just got her outlined, because I'm sure it'll be better than mine. But be careful, Brother Clark. You know, my dad, when I was a kid, he used to, if I misbehaved in church, he would put my name down and make an X or a check mark. And if I got 3 of those, I was in trouble when I got home. You got 1. There's number 2. All right, turn to the book of Hebrews, please. And let's go through just quickly an introduction. And I'm going to be using the PowerPoint tonight, maybe. And tried to get fancy with it. Usually when I do that, it doesn't show up very well, so we'll see how this one does. This is the book of Hebrews. Look at there. The introduction, and I know this is not an in-depth introduction at all, but it'll give us a good idea of what we're talking about. He just introduces the book in verses 1 through 4, and number 2, the superiority of Christ to angels, chapter 1, verse 5, all the way through chapter 2, verse 18. And already in the outline, you're going to see the purpose of the book take shape. But you'll especially see that as we look at some key words tonight. And then Christ is superior to Moses and Joshua in chapter 3, all the way through chapter 4, verse 16. Talk about Christ's high priesthood in chapters 5 through 7. That's where Melchizedek comes into play. And you may have read that before and said, what in the world does Melchizedek have to do with anything? Well, we'll talk about that. Number 5, there's the ministry of Christ as high priest. What's he do for us? And that's a beautiful, beautiful part of the book right there. The application to the readers. We'll look at the application, if we have time, not only to the readers of the first century, but also to us. And then a conclusion with some social and religious duties and personal instructions. Chapter 13, you kind of think, well, we're done with the book. We'll fly through that. Hopefully in your reading, we're not there yet, but hopefully in your reading, you'll take some time and pay close attention to that, because that's really easy to apply to our own lives. So there's the outline of the book. Again, it's a very brief outline, but I think it's a good one to let us know where we're going in the book. The next one, a lot of quotations from the Psalms are in this book. And I want to just take a look at some of those tonight, well, all of those tonight, and just comment briefly on those. Let me go ahead and give them all for you. Look at Hebrews chapter 1, verse 6. As you were reading this, and I don't know how your Bible is set up, if you're using the King James or New King James or something else, but a lot of times you'll know that it's a quotation from the Old Testament. The New King James puts it in quotes and also italicizes it, and I'm sure yours probably does as well. But look at Hebrews chapter 1, verse 6. But when he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels of God worship him. Let all the angels of God worship him. And from there he quotes Psalm 97, verse 7, and also Psalm chapter 2, or Psalm 2, verse 7. You can kind of see, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, you know, one of the things I love about the Bible, and you read some other books that are supposed to be sacred books of other religions, like you look at the Quran and the Book of Mormon, and others that are said to be sacred books. You read through there, and it looks like something sometimes we might write, where it's just something, well, this is on my mind today, so I think I'll write about this. Or this is on my mind, oh, this is a neat point, I think I'll write about this. But when it comes to the Bible, here's something that was written centuries of years before. And no doubt the psalmists, when they were writing these things, they knew what it meant for that time. But it wasn't just for their time. It had deeper meaning, and the real meaning had to do with Jesus Christ. And I remember when we first started here, one of the first classes we had together was looking at Jesus in the Old Testament. Well, He's all throughout the Psalms. And so as the writer of Hebrews is talking about Jesus, he goes all the way back to the Psalms. Now, why do you think he would do that? Why do you think he would use the Psalms to prove his point for a New Testament teaching? Any ideas? He's not the only one that does that. Every writer in the New Testament does that. Why do you think they do that? What's that? To qualify it, give it deeper meaning. That's a great point. And it does. When you see this, it does. You go back and you understand it in the New Testament, and when you go back and reread the Psalms, and you read it, now I know what that means, and it means even more in its immediate context. What else? To qualify it? The Christians were Jewish. Most of them came from a Jewish background, and that's the purpose of the Hebrews, is people who are wanting to go back to their Jewish way of doing things, going back to the old law. They knew the Scriptures, and his point is, listen, they were talking about this all the way back here. It was going to be fulfilled in Jesus. Why in the world would you want to go back to the teaching back here when you could have its fulfillment at its greatest meaning here in the New Testament? This is what you're giving up. The psalmists knew about it all the way back then. And that had to really, what was Peter's sermon in the Apostles? Peter's was recorded. What was it all about in Acts chapter 2? What did he do? This is what this prophet said. This is what David said. This is what all of this meant is fulfilled. You're seeing it being fulfilled today. So it all came to life. Look at Hebrews chapter 1, verse 8. But to the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. Quoting Psalm 45, verse 6. Remember from our outline, talk about Jesus being superior to the angels. Who worshipped whom? Did Jesus worship the angels, or did the angels worship Jesus? Whose kingdom was going to live forever, to last forever? The kingdom of angels? No. Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. And then Hebrews 1, verse 13. But to which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool? How many angels has God ever said that to? Who did he say it to? See, why in the world would you want to go back when you've got the real thing in Jesus? And then Hebrews chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. But one testified in a certain place, saying, what is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you take care of him? You have made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with the glory and honor, and set him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet. We've read that psalm before. Who penned that psalm? Let's go back and look at it. Psalm 8. Now that you see the title up there, who do we believe penned this psalm? David. And then let's read it, just starting at verse 1. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants you have ordained strength because of your enemies, that you may silence the enemy and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained. And then here's where the quote comes from. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor. You have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. Where did that have its ultimate fulfillment? No doubt when David penned that, those are beautiful words. But aren't they so much more beautiful now that we know to whom the world is in subjection? Let's look at some key words. And this is, to me, you can find the key words in books, and it will tell you, all right, here's the reason I'm writing. Some of those are easier to find than others. In some books, it's easier to find. Hebrews, it's pretty easy. If you read it enough times, and we're going to be reading it 7 times, if we read it enough times, some words will just jump out at you. And so as you continue your reading in this book, look for these words. The first one is let us. Let us. Not let us. Let us. Let us. Let's look at a few of these. Well, let's look at all of them. Chapter 4, Hebrews 4, verse 1. And see if you can start getting the purpose of the book. Chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. Sometimes when we read in the Bible, you read the word fear, and what can it mean? What can its meaning be? If I say, fear the Lord your God, oftentimes, what's that talking about? Respect, a deep reverence. But this one, and I put it, I anglicized the Greek word, and there it is. Can you see an English word that we get from that word? Phobia, absolutely. Phobia. What's a phobia? What's hydrophobia? Fear of water. And I don't know many others. Does anybody know what the fear of heights is called? I don't. What is it? I don't know. There's an agoraphobia. There's a bunch of phobias, isn't there? And so here's the word fear. Phobeo, to frighten or to be sore afraid, is Strong's definition. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. Then drop down to chapter 4, verse 11. We have our next time it's mentioned. Look at verse 11. Let us, there's our phrase, therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. Let us therefore be diligent. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to be diligent. Look that word up. Vincent's Word Studies means to give diligence. To give diligence. And then there's a second meaning in this, as he tries to explain, give us the full meaning in our English language that you would read in the Greek. Not only to give diligence to it, but not hasten. Not hasten. And I think that's an interesting word. It's labor in the King James. It's give diligence in the New King James. But it also means not to hasten. And I like that. I can be very serious about things, want to do a good job. But one of the things that often happens is we want to rush through things. Are there any people in here that when the teacher would give out a test in class, if somebody turned it in before you, did it make you angry? Not maybe angry, but it bothered you? That was me. And then there were other students that would wait like 2 seconds before the time was up, and they would hand, and those are usually the better students, by the way. But take your time with it. Take your time. Give diligence. Let us give diligence to this. For what purpose? Well, he tells us. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. We need to give diligence to make sure. Take our time. Be diligent about it. Be purposeful about it to make sure we don't fall into the same trap these people were doing. Wish we could spend so much time on all of these. Look at chapter 4, verse 14. Seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our, New King James says, confession. King James says, hold fast our profession. Our profession. Acknowledgement or our confession. In other words, that which we acknowledged when we started running the race, let us be diligent to keep that. Hold fast. Let us hold fast to that. What's your most, and you may not want to answer this, but I'm not talking about, don't give me the answer you think a preacher wants to hear. I'm not talking about your husband or your children or your grandchildren. What is a something that just means the most? It may not even be really valuable to you, but something that means a lot. It might not be valuable as far as money, but something that means a lot to you. Can you think of something? Just think of something in your mind. Where do you keep that? Probably in a place where you know it will not get lost or damaged or stolen. Maybe a safe or something like that. Hold fast to that. Don't let it out of your grasp. And then another one in chapter 4, verse 16, a lot in chapter 4. Let us come boldly. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Let us come boldly. I liked what Vincent said about this. He said, Christianity is the religion of free access to God. Now stop and think about that. Chapter 4 discusses this in great detail. The throne of grace expresses grace as the gift of divine power. But Christianity is the religion of free access to God. Now think about this. It's the only religion where you can have free access to God. And I'm talking about true Christianity, because there are some that even claim to be Christians that you still have to go through somebody else. You have to go through a priest and he'll talk to God on your behalf. But we're the only ones that we can have free access to the throne of God. Does that mean something? That's awesome, isn't it? So let us therefore come boldly. Let's look at some more. We'll have to go through some of these quicker. Yes, sir.
Just an example of
I don't know if you got to hear what Mr. Ted said. He said, Roman Catholicism, there for a long period, not just a short period, but a long period, took the Bibles out of the hands of the people. And people who were putting it in the languages they could read and understand for themselves, they were burning them at the stake, literally, because they didn't think lay people like you and me could even understand it without their help to do that. And what a blessing to be able to read it, understand it, and then talk to God straight myself. That beautiful thing. Let us, chapter 6, verse 1, and we won't spend much time on this because we talk about it. Actually, let me just spend a little time on this, because we'll talk about it and this will introduce a little bit of it. Go on to perfection. Look at chapter 6, verse 1. Therefore, leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Christ, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith toward God. That word of the beginning of Christ, or the rudiments of the beginning, that rudimentary view of Christ's person and office which unfolds in the doctrine of the priesthood. These people were wanting to stick with the Old Testament, which gave just a general introduction to Christ. It told you He was coming. It told you some of the things that He was going to do. But where is this understanding truly believed and taught and fulfilled? It's in the new teaching. Notice, let us therefore leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Christ. Do we leave the elementary principles of Christ ever? No. It's not like, okay, I preached on baptism one time. I never have to talk on that discussion ever again. But what were these people doing? Up to this point, the writer has been showing only that the permanent elements of the Old Covenant remain and are exalted in who? In Christ. I saw one commentator put this: the more difficult point, which it will require a matured perception to grasp, is that Christ's priesthood involves the entire abolition of the Old Covenant. They weren't wanting to let that go, were they? They were wanting to stick to that Old Testament teaching and were not wanting to let that go. Let us be born unto completeness, and because of this, we have to leave. You have to leave those things that they had been trying to stick to. And then chapter 10, verse 22, let us draw near. And that's another beautiful one. Let us draw near. For then would they have not ceased to be offered, for the worshippers once purified would have had no more consciousness of their sin. That's not the one I was looking for. 22. Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure waters. Why can you draw near to God? Because of the sacrifice of bulls and goats? Or whose sacrifice? Christ's sacrifice. Let's draw near. Then, verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Are you already seeing a pattern here? What's he saying in all of this? Let us be afraid to fall. Be diligent, labor. Let us labor. Let us hold fast our confession. Let us come boldly. And then here, let us hold fast our hope or our faith. Then look at chapter 10, verse 24. And let us consider one another to stir up love and good works. What's the context of this? Take note of each other's spiritual welfare. Let us draw nigh. Let's not give up. Let us hold fast. And then what? And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. What's one of the purpose or one of the responsibilities we have for one another? Not only do I hold fast to my confession, but what am I trying to do with you and you with me? Trying to help me. You're encouraging one another. Let us hold fast. Take notice of each other's spiritual welfare. Then chapter 12, verse 1, the next let us. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, here it is, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us, there it is again, run with endurance the race that is set before us. Put that in your own words. And how would you put that in your own words? Don't try to come up with anything fancy. From that chapter 12, verse 1, what would you say in your own words? If you were saying this to me, what would you say? What is it? Keep on keeping on. That's good. And that's succinct. And that's it. Keep on keeping on. You ever stop to think? This was going to be part of my lesson for our plans that we had for 2020 at the beginning. You have the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then you've got the history of the church, Acts or the book of Acts. And then all the letters really have one main purpose. And that is, don't give up. Don't throw away your salvation. Don't throw away what you have. Keep on keeping on. Hold fast. Now, the first let us in chapter 12, verse 1, requires something from us. And what does it have us do? Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us. The word literally is a bulk or a mass. Let us throw the bulk that we're carrying around, or that big mass that we're carrying around. Let us lay it aside. Keep on keeping on. And this would preach if we had more time, but You think about in your own life, what are those things that you're hanging on to that are keeping you from being all that you could be in the Lord? It might be something big in your mind, or it might be something that's just so silly to keep hanging on to. You ever known somebody who will train for running or whatever, and they'll put ankle weights on and carry weights in their hands as well? They do that when they're training. But what would you think if you saw them wearing those things the day of the race? Let me tell you something. It'd work a lot better if you took those things off and you could run this race a lot better. So many times we try to hold on to those things that are just weighing us down. For these people, not wanting to give up the old law, it was a big mass, a big block that they were just carrying around. They could lay it aside. They could have so much more. Chapter 12, verse 28. Chapter 12, verse 28. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. What's that mean, to have grace? I thought God was the only one that had to have grace. Let it come from the heart. Let it not just be lip service. Chapter 13, verse 13. Therefore, let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. Literally, bring up the offering to the altar. And then chapter 13, verse 15. Offer the sacrifice of praise. Therefore, by him let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. Let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise. The rabbis used to have a saying, in the future sacrifices will cease, but praises shall not cease. What should all of this cause us to do? Here it is in verse 15. Bring up a sacrifice of praise to him. Do you see a theme already in just the first phrase, let us? You see it. And it's such a motivational book, isn't it? Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Hold on to it. Hold on to it tight. Let it be from your heart. Let it come from the inside out. Don't give up. You ever notice how much of the Bible is motivational? Let me ask it this way. I think you could be right either way you answer. So you'll be right either way. Do you think oftentimes that it's not so much as we don't know what we should do, but it's more that we just really don't want to do what we know we need to do? I think that's a lot in life. Do you know that giving up cookies and ice cream, I'm trying to think of all my favorites. Do you know that giving those things up would be good for you? Good for me? I'm going to just use me. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. You know that that would be good for me to give that up? And we all know that. Then why don't we? Because we don't want to. Because we don't want to. How much of the New Testament is, listen, Christian, you know what you need to be doing. The problem is you're just not doing it. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Why are things like Weight Watchers, going in and weighing and having to give account to somebody else, All right, you gained 3 pounds this week, Mark. What's your problem? Well, I did this. I don't want to let that person down. And so why is that motivational? Because you have accountability. You have accountability. And that's Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. Help one another in all of this. So we got to stay strong. We're going to look at the next one next week. The next one is going to be better. As you read, you've probably already seen that. Watch how many times that word is used in the book of Hebrews. And we're going to make a point next week. Let me just put this seed in your mind right now. When things get tough, we're always tempted to go back to what we've always known. You think about the Israelites. What were they crying just as soon as they got to the Red Sea? Why can't we just go back? It would be better for us to serve them than to die in the wilderness. These people, persecution is coming. What were they wanting to do? If we just go back, we'd be just like everybody else. That persecution would stop if we could just go back. And sometimes even we as Christians, I try so hard. I stumble so much. It might just be easier for me to just go back into the world and not even try anymore. But think about this for next week. What we have in Christ, if we'll keep that before us, and what we would give up by going back, that's what we're going to study next week. Christ is better for so many reasons. All right, we're supposed to get this one done tonight, but you know me by now. Let's get ready to